This is called 3 Decades. It's a commemorative outline. My audience is Mrs. Suzanne, Brianna, Air Force officers, senior enlisted, soldiers, family, and friends. Rick's 30-year retirement, or 3 decades in the Air Force. It was 30 years ago that many things in American culture and history happened. Raging Bull, Airplane, and an evil menace from the Empire were ruling the movies. JR was shot dead on Dallas as Walter Cronkite announced his retirement. CNN and Magnum PI both get started this year as David Letterman starts The Show on NBC. Blondie is the biggest hit in music, and we have a legend in John Lennon die. This is just the backdrop to one of the most significant things happening in 1980. The biggest thing to most of us was the enlistment of Rick into the U.S. Air Force. From what you have already heard, you see Rick has lasted much longer than many things from this time period. Rick's enlistment started something in the family that has not stopped. Rick was the first one to join the military from our family. He was followed a few years later by his younger brother Dodd into the Army. Then by myself some 5 years later also into the Army. Much later by his nephew and niece. And what will be one more nephew this year, all into the Air Force. We have spent some time talking about Rick's family, following in his footsteps. Now let's talk a little bit more about Rick. Rick joined, I am sure, ultimately, to get away from the big city of Waldoboro, Maine. But in doing so, he has led an incredible life that I am sure, even at the time, was unexpected. Rick was able to visit many different countries, from China, Australia, and the Philippines, to more local areas inside the U.S., such as Washington State, Texas, and Oklahoma, to name a very small amount. Rick's accomplishments are numerous. He has been able to get a degree, juggle family life, and still deploy on numerous missions all around the world. He has been stationed in Germany, Japan, and other select areas the Air Force was kind enough to send him, never once complaining. He has pulled his weight on and off the aircraft and was always ready to lend a helping hand. Rick is a proud dad and an even prouder grandpa. Now how about Rick's service to the Air Force? Let's discuss this a little. Rick has numerous awards and decorations from the military for his exemplary service and dedication to mission accomplishment. Rick is not one to ever let a mission fail. He is the hardest worker on the aircraft, ensuring everything is right prior to takeoff. Rick is often sought after by both peers and subordinates alike. He is always willing to lend his opinion if asked, and is sure to let you know if something is incorrect. Rick is liked by many of his soldiers and is well known for taking care of his troops on and off the flight line, both in good and adverse conditions. I can remember a time when Rick was deployed to Kuwait and I was able to come visit him at the base. Rick and some of his co-workers and friends were having a barbecue. Sitting around chatting, waiting for the food to finish, a young lieutenant was asking Rick for his advice. Rick was able to lend this young officer his opinion that comes with more than 3 decades of service. I will leave you with this. Rick was and is a great asset to the U.S. Air Force. It will be extremely hard to fill his shoes. His vast knowledge will be greatly missed by his co-workers, and it will be impossible to replace him. Congratulations.